started the recording.
I'd like to open this Monday, September 9th, 2024 executive meeting. I'd like to call to order. We have a roll call, please.
Mr. Taylor,
Here.
Mr. Cunningham, Lou, you're muted. I'll come back to Mr. Cunningham. Mr. Elliott,
Here.
Ms. Hancock,
Here.
Ms. Williams,
Here.
Mr. Bedell,
Present.
and then Mr. Cunningham is here. So, Mr. Chair, you have 6.
Okay, very good. Thank you. First up, we have our monthly education. Who do we have to present that, please?
Hello, I'm Susanna, for those of you who may not know me, and I was part of an intern team in the planning department this summer working on this project of impact fees in the traffic generation assessment. So I'm going to present a little bit of that about that to you all today, and then Peter Grein, who was our project manager, is going to present the other half of it.
So the project the interns were working on was focusing on impact fees, which are very prevalent throughout the country. With impact fees are one-time payments made by developers to a local government. These fees are intended to help manage the increased external impacts and infrastructural expenses generated by new development. The fees are collected and spent within a certain geographic area, often within a given time frame. And U.S. case law indicates that collected impact fees must improve local infrastructure services related to the fee incurred and be reasonably proportional in cost to the assumed impacts.
So now we're going to dive a little bit further into the actual traffic generation assessment, or TGA. So the TGA is St. Louis County's only impact fee, and all of the funds from it are allocated for roadway improvements. The way that these funds are calculated is based on a fee per parking space of a development, and it's meant to sort of offset the impacts that a new development would have on the roadways surrounding the development. So for example, a parking space at a hospital is going to be charged more than like a daycare, because a hospital has cars coming and going 24/7, 365 days a year, whereas a daycare has cars coming and going twice a day, a couple of days a week, and therefore there is a lower expectation of incurred traffic from a daycare than a hospital. And the parking spaces are all set out by the parking minimum rules that we have in the county zoning ordinance that we adopted in 1965. So the sort of framework and a couple more details of the TGA, it's explained in Chapter 11 of the Design Criteria Manual, which is overseen by the Department of Transportation and Public Works. A couple of idiosyncrasies, I guess, of the TGA is that the boundaries of the 26 individual trust funds, which are the bank accounts that all hold the money for these geographical areas, at times overlap with municipalities, and when that happens, the trust fund money is just reserved for the county roads within that area, whether it's a municipality or not. So all of the money goes towards county maintained roads. However, of these trust funds, there are certain areas that you see circled in red on this map that are unincorporated areas that do not have a trust fund because of the fact that the trust fund model was adopted back in 1983 and then has never been changed. Some of these areas have since been annexed or have been switched over to other municipalities, and so it leaves these little pockets of missing trust fund area that still exist. And then the last little detail is that each trust fund is established with a singular ordinance, and there is no overall governing ordinance of any of these trust funds. It's just the 26 individual trust funds, and then the structure is set out in the Design Criteria Manual.
So the TGA has three major limitations that come from how the program's designed and about socioeconomic factors of the St. Louis County region. So first, only planned districts, which include the Amistad Mixed Use Development District, the M3 Planned Industrial District, the C8 Planned Commercial District, and the PEU Planned Environmental Units, are eligible for TGA. This policy design ensures that the majority of development in St. Louis County will not contribute TGA fees. Important to note. The second limitation is the reliance on parking minimums for assessing fees. So this is problematic because parking minimums, are generally scrutinized within the planning field for increasing the supply of required parking and accentuating auto-oriented uses. And they also are relatively unscientific for assessing projected traffic generation associated with different land uses. And lastly, and this is kind of specific to the St. Louis County region, because the parking minimums is what is the kind of the unit for assessment for TGA fees, that means that greenfield development is going to require, is going to accrue a greater number of fees because you're going to have more parking units associated with that development. Whereas with redevelopments, they will, the county will consider existing parking when evaluating what's eligible for impact fees. Because there are fewer greenfield development opportunities in the county, it's very much a redeveloping county, which is something that we talk about a lot at Planning Commission meetings. That means over time, we would expect the amount of TGA money coming to the county to steadily decrease.
So now we're going to discuss a little bit more specifically some of that fiscal analysis and what the actual numbers of the TGA are.
So this graph shows the last 10 years of collected funds for all of the TGA trust funds. There's 26, as Susanna referenced. And you can see some of those downstream effects of what I was talking about from those limitations. So you can see the instability year to year. It's fairly obvious. The graph also shows a stagnancy and mild decline of collection over the decade. And I think even when you look at the peak collection, it's still less than $1.2 million, which is not nothing, but it's also insignificant compared to St. Louis County's infrastructure expenses.
So I know that this slide is a lot to look at, but what we wanted to emphasize here is that we have the total available balance for all of these trust funds, which comes out to a little more than $7 million, which admittedly feels like a lot of money. However, when it is broken up between all of the trust funds, we end up with these 6 highlighted trust funds that all have less than $100,000 in them. Missouri Bottom specifically is the lowest earning trust fund. One year it only earned $39 in TGA fees. And so it has a total balance of less than $10,000. So when we're talking road improvement, having less than $100,000 is barely even a drop in the bucket. And to Peter's point, when we're talking about a county that is as big as ours, has road infrastructure needs as much as we do, this amount of money that the TGA is bringing in is just not significant enough to actually achieve the goal that it's set out to do, which is improve the roads. So now we're going to just talk very briefly about a couple options going forward with the TGA.
So ultimately, St. Louis County cannot likely maintain the TGA as it's currently constituted. If the county did attempt to resolve these issues, there are 2 main options that the intern group kind of identified. First would be the TGA could adjust the model to capture development impacts for a wider array of projects outside of planned districts using a criteria other than parking minimums. So this would be pretty common for other impact fees kind of used around the country, which don't really traditionally use parking minimums, and they definitely don't rely on their equivalent of a planned district in terms of only collecting from those kinds of developments. For example, many peer regions assess impact fees based on development square footage or number of proposed units within a development. With this approach, the county would most likely maintain the existing trust fund structure. However, if the county wanted to, in a more fully reimagined way, reconsider its impact fee program and contemplate how impact fees could fund a wider array of infrastructure improvements beyond roadway improvements, which currently the TGA is used to fund a fairly narrow subset of improvements. Impact fees elsewhere are collected to benefit multimodal transportation, educational improvements and utility improvements. So they can be used in a more broad way. Impact fees are one tool that St. Louis County can leverage to improve the built environment and influence how and where development takes place. And the department thinks that reconsidering the TGA is one component of a wider effort to catalyze good planning practice in the county.
And we would be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions?
One thing I'll just add while people are thinking of their really insightful questions is after the intern team and Peter and company we presented this to the county executives team and some of the department directors as well to sort of introduce the concept to them and get their thoughts and to sort of probe how much of this is something that we really do want to move forward and think about rethinking. So good job, Peter. Good job, Susanna.
And I have a question. So one thing that occurs to me is in those areas that we might need more help with the infrastructure that's actually keeping development away, sort of seems like it works against it because it's limited to just that little geographic area.
Yeah, they are limited to those trust fund areas, and something that I think we'd uncovered before, but uncovered again through going through this project was that the University Place site where the two apartment developments on either side of University Place Drive by the Metrolink station, the North Hanley Metrolink station, that area isn't encompassed in a trust fund. So even though both of those developments are proposed using the planned environmental unit procedure, the county won't get any TGA funds from either of those projects. And then sort of, I think, related to what you've just said, Sandy, is that often we have conversations with developers where we maybe the planned district procedure is the way to go, and we get some pushback about, oh, you just want to get TGA out of my project, when that's never what we're considering. So it does, I would agree that in some ways it's actually the worst case scenario what we have now.
All right. Do we have any more questions?
And as always, if anyone thinks of a question afterwards, or if this sparks another thought, just let us know.
I
So
would say, oh, I'm so sorry, Sandy. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so what's the plan now? Where does it go from here?
Well, actually, that's a perfect question for what I was about to say. So the interns were drafting a report, which is kind of a lengthier, more in-depth version of this presentation that Susanna and I are, with the help of other senior staff, kind of editing. And if folks on the commission would be interested in a copy of the report, I'm sure we would be happy to provide it. And that will be provided to various departmental members throughout the county. And then, I mean, one of the tricky things about TGA is, it's cross, it interacts with many departments within the county. So it requires, probably a task force of interdepartmental members to figure out, how do we try and amend this program that's been in place for many decades now. So It'll probably, it's not a minor undertaking.
I think everybody, this is Keith, I think everybody would enjoy reading your report. That comes back out if you can copy everybody.
We
on
can
your
certainly
stuff.
share it.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter and Susanna. That was pretty informative, I'm sure, for most. It was for me. Thanks a lot. Okay, let's move on here. I'm going to get a motion to approve our minutes from our executive meeting on August 5th.
I make that motion. This is Arvetta.
Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have that. Thank you. We don't have a status sheet. Committee reports. We have the Comprehensive Planning Committee report of August 26th meeting. There was minutes. Did we have minutes included?
The report, the minutes are the report of the committee. So these drafted minutes.
Okay.
So
So can
Keith,
we
I
have
think
that?
it's just, I'm sorry, I'll wait for the motion, but then I think it'll be you, Keith, to sort of report out on that.
Okay, very good. So we'll get a motion to approve the minutes, and I'll report on what our meeting was about.
I make a motion to approve it.
You got a second?
Second, this is Arvetta.
Thank you, Arvetta. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have that. All right. Well, when I was at the meeting, August 20, or was that there? Was that the 22nd, I believe?
The actual steering committee was the
Yes.
22nd, yeah.
August 22nd, and I'll kind of go over that because that's pretty much what we talked about at our comprehensive planning meeting on the 26th. We had this meeting. It was down at the Afton Community Center, and I believe Arvetta was there. Todd was not there, and I think Chris, were you there?
Christopher was there, and then I think Paula was there as
And
well.
Paul is not with us tonight.
Not
Okay.
today, right?
Anyways, we had our presentation from the people that are developing the plan, as well as the attendance of all the staff here of Jacob and Mel and the rest of the staff. And we had a little workshop, which had us set at separate tables. Well, I think there was like 6 tables, I believe.
Hmm.
Okay, and at this meeting, we had a map of the county with trace paper to go across that map of all the municipalities, our residential areas, our commercial areas, our industrial areas. It showed, every road and our Metrolink bus lines, and they asked us to come up with solutions to make this county better. What's going to make this county better? And it went across a lot of the things that, I think everybody probably knows, or and I'm sure they do, and a lot of things we did. So, the table that I was sitting at, right off the bat, we started talking about the Metrolink and places that the Metrolink should be going, and maybe should have been going when they first planned it. And I think maybe it was sections that go from all the way north to south, all the way down into South County, all the way out to West County. They even talked about taking a spur up to the new zoo center up in North County, up in the area where the pipe fitters property used to be. And then that was a lot of discussion about that. Big discussions about what they want to call reasonable housing, not affordable housing, not just in places where, you know, folks have where they consider people just having lower income. It's all over the county. It's spread out all over where they need reasonable, what they want to call reasonable housing for everybody. That was a big portion. There were portions that at one time were considered residential, and quite honestly, it's probably not possible that's ever going to happen. So, you know, they were looking at how can we get some type of light industrial in some of those areas in the unincorporated parts of our county. And it was just little things like that that add up to a lot to end up making this county a much better place for everybody with more tax revenue coming in the door as well. More mixed use in some places. You know, there was some things that have started. They noted like it's not in the county right now. It's in the county, but not unincorporated. They talked about what's going to happen over here at where the Chesterfield Mall was at. I think everybody's seen that on TV. They're taking the mall down and they're going to reinvent it with mixed use. And it'd be nice to be able to do that in our other areas in North County, and we can see that's probably what's going to happen down in South County at the South County Mall. I sure don't want to see that. Any of these malls. I live close enough to Chesterfield Mall. That was my mall to go shopping, and I hated to see that close when it finally closed down, but it happened. And I looked for that to happen in South County, just for the way that people shop on their online shopping. That's a big portion of that. So that's what I had to say about this. Anybody else on the committee would like to add to that? Please do. Please do. Chris or Irvetta, you were there, and Sandy, were you there also? I'm sorry.
I was at the
Oh.
previous meeting,
At the previous one, but not the one
not
at
this one. Mhm.
Okay.
So this is Arvetta. I got there later.
Mhm.
And the tables, the groups were already well into their conversation. So the table I joined also was looking at where MetroLink could expand to and going further west. And so the kind of housing that you're referencing, Keith, they would call it workforce housing that's available for the workforce, not just in low and moderate income communities, but in all communities, because some people have to catch public transportation to work.
Sure.
And I shared a story at my table about my nephew who then was in his 20s, who lived in kind of the Olivet Creve Coeur area, but he worked at one of those Chesterfield outlet malls. And he got off of work at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, and he didn't have a car. He was catching public transportation. He had to walk a mile in the dark on an outer road with no sidewalks to go to the bus stop because Metro wouldn't send a bus to the outlet mall. And that just sounds crazy to me because there actually was a bus stop on the mall grounds. So those kind of considerations, they're very much needed. The public transportation for where the workforce is, who's working in these areas. So that was my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I sure would.
Yes.
Very important. Anybody else have anything? Christopher? Okay.
I'll just add that I know when the Comprehensive Planning Committee met, we indicated that there will be an online version of that same activity for folk to do. We don't have that link yet, but when we do, we'll share that with the commission. That way, if there's something an idea you wanted to build on, or if you just wanted to do the activity yourself, you'll be able to. So we'll share that when it's ready.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Alrighty, let's move on to new business. We got our petitions here. Are we going to present those? Then we got PC 31-24 Alliance Animal Health.
Good evening, Commissioners. Before you is PC 31-24 Alliance Animal Health. The request is for a conditional use permit procedure in the C2 shopping district. The proposed uses are an animal hospital, veterinary clinic, and a freestanding automatic teller machine or ATM for a 0.56 acre tract on the southeast quadrant of Gravois Road and Tesson Ferry Road. From the context map, you can see that the site is located in South County. On the right, you can see the site outlined in red on the aerial. From this larger aerial, you can see the site outlined in red once again at the intersection of Gravois Road and Tesson Ferry Road. As this request is for an animal hospital, veterinary clinic, and freestanding ATM, the conditional use permit procedure is required to cite such uses in the C2 shopping district. The preliminary site development plan shown at public hearing revealed minimal site improvements at the location. The plan shows the retention of an existing building and the parking units associated with that building. The site development plan does show or indicate the replacement of the existing currently damaged trash enclosure. The department is recommending approval of the request, finding that the request meets the 4-prong test required for approval for a conditional use permit procedure. The department finds that continued commercial zoning in the CUP procedure is appropriate for the proposed land uses and location. The department finds that a veterinary clinic and a freestanding ATM can be operated in an appropriate manner at the proposed location. And finally, the department finds that the preliminary site development plan is generally sound for the proposed uses, subject to the following recommended conditions. The department recommends that the petitioner construct a decorative site-proof fence along any property line shared with a C commercial or R residential zone land use, and further recommends that any new signage must be monument in style. And the department recommends that all new light standards be 16 feet in height to limit light spillage onto neighboring parcels. And at this time, I would like to request a motion.
You've heard the recommendation of the staff. Do I have a motion for approval?
Make a motion for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second.
Okay, before we take a vote, is there any questions? Okay, if not,
I have a question.
go
So
right ahead, Sandy.
new signage must be monument and new light standards would be 16 foot, but I guess the lighting and the signage that's there now can remain? Is that,
That would be the opinion of the department.
and so is that signage, I mean, or the light, is that like at a height that would be detrimental to the neighbors? Or how do we know that?
So the permissible light standard height for commercial in the commercial districts is actually 25. I think it's 25. So we're actually recommending that if they do install any new light standards, they be 16 feet in height, which is the residential maximum height of a lighting standard. So if they do add new lights, they would have to be shorter than actually the C2 permits. So for that exact reason, to make sure that any new lighting on the site isn't detrimental to the, I think one of the neighbors is a residence and the other one's a business. And then I don't believe there's a freestanding sign at all right now. So if they did, is that right, Peter?
No, there's that pole
There is
sign
one?
in the
Okay.
corner, yeah.
So yeah, if they swapped out the cabinet, they could swap out the cabinet, but if they ever replace that sign, it won't be a pole sign anymore.
I guess what I'm saying is that basically we're saying the lights could be 25 feet tall and there's nothing that we're gonna do to change that. Right? It seems like it seems like if we feel like 16 feet is the appropriate height, that we should be recommending all the
Sure.
lights be 16 feet.
So when a site is not being, like, they're not truly redeveloping it, we don't typically make the property owner tear out existing improvements if they were redoing their entire parking lot and they were going to have to take the light standards out and stuff. When they replaced them, they'd have to come in compliance with this regulation, but we don't typically have them tear out improvements that previously were compliant.
Okay,
Yeah.
I got it. I understand. Thank you.
Mel, question for you, and this might help. Did they purchase this property or are they renting the property?
They are renting it. They
There
are
you go.
a
There's
tenant.
another reason why they probably wouldn't want to tear out the lights because of the cost and the signage itself.
Mhm.
Okay, are there any other questions? If not, can we have a vote on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Ayes have it. And next, we have PC 32-24 DSX Tuning LLC.
Good evening, Commissioners. PC 32-24 DSS Tuning LLC is a request for a conditional use permit in the M1 Industrial District for the purpose of vehicle service center and vehicle repair facility on a 2.59 acres tract located in the west side of Rivers Park Drive, approximately 400 feet south of Rivers Road. The site is located in the South County from the county context map, and to the right of the screen is the subject site outlined in red. This is the larger area photographed. To the north and west as childhood center, senior living facility, and single family homes in the R2 residence district. To the east and south are offices, warehouses, vehicle service centers, manufacturing and light industries. Again, this is a request for a conditional use permit to operate a vehicle service facility. The petitioners did state at the public hearing that the vehicle service currently operates south of the petition tract, but wishes to relocate to the currently petition tract because of it offers more space. They also stated that the business is manufacturing and installing specialty parts for high-end vehicles. It also stated that the business will continue to operate as it is, in that there are no daily service lines. Hours of operation is between 8 to 4, Mondays to Fridays, and there are no outdoor storage. The preliminary site development plan shown at the public hearing, it shows the utilization of the existing building, the removal of the existing refrigerated storage building to be replaced with a covered part for the dynamometer equipment. It shows retention of the existing 64 parking spaces and trees and shrubs along the northern and western property lines. The permit is recommending approval because the request meets the 4-prong conditional use permit test. The site development plan is consistent with good planning practice. The proposed use is also in keeping with other uses along Rivers Park Drive. The proposed use can be operated in a manner that is not detrimental to surrounding permitted development. The conditions of development will ensure the use is visually compatible with permitted uses in the surrounding area, and development and use are deemed desirable to preserve and promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of St. Louis County. Some of the revisions we'd like to see on the site plan is that we're requesting that there will be more landscaping around Rivers Park Drive. And at this point, I request for a motion.
You've heard the recommendation of the staff for a motion of approval. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Do we have a
Second the
second on the motion?
Second the motion.
Second motion. Do we have any questions? No questions? If not, do we have a vote on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays? Ayes have it. Thank you. Old business, ready for action. We have PC 04-24 St. Louis County Planning Commission.
Good evening. PC 04-24 St. Louis County Planning Commission was a proposal to consider changes to Chapter 1003 zoning ordinance of the St. Louis County Revised Ordinances, including but not limited to accessory uses and structures, conditional use permits, site design criteria, facilities for local government use, and definitions. The zoning ordinance was adopted in 1965 and has undergone piecemeal updates since then. These updates are necessary to reflect shifts in land use patterns throughout the county and best practices in planning. Tonight, we're bringing you a broad text tune-up of several sections of the zoning ordinance. We've been working on this since January, and it captures a wide range of items throughout most sections of the zoning ordinance. We'll be covering a lot of information, so if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to jump in. It'll probably be easier that way than waiting until the end for questions. But you're also welcome to hold questions to the end if you prefer. So the first item is accessory uses and structures. The zoning ordinance currently contains definitions and regulations for the size of accessory structures in residential districts, but there are no regulations for accessory structures in commercial or industrial districts. Additionally, the zoning enforcement officer has provided an interpretation of the code that further limits the size of accessory structures in residential districts. The Board of Zoning Adjustment reviews a high number of requests for variances from the accessory structure regulations, so the department found it appropriate to review those regulations for simplification and clarity. This is a table of the existing and proposed definitions. We have proposed changes to the definition for accessory structure and warehouse, which we find add clarity, and have proposed definitions for building footprint, building line, carport, detached garage, detached accessory structure, primary structure, structure attached, structure detached, structure semi-attached, and structure unenclosed patios, porches, and decks. In the NU, KP, and R districts, we are recommending the zoning enforcement officer's interpretation of the code be added to the code itself. This will limit the size of an individual accessory structure to 400 square feet or 50% of the building footprint of the primary structure, whichever is greater. It will limit the total size of all accessory structures to 1,000 square feet in gross floor area, regardless of the size of the primary structure. We also recommend explicitly stating that accessory structures are subject to the setback requirements of the underlying zoning district and prohibiting them from the front yard of a parcel. Lastly, we recommend limiting the number of accessory structures permitted to 1 detached garage and 2 other detached accessory structures for a total of 3 permitted per lot. We find these regulations will help preserve the residential character of neighborhoods while giving residents the ability to utilize accessory structures. We recommend limiting commercial or industrial developments to 1 accessory structure. Since the items stored in accessory structures for commercial or industrial uses vary so widely in terms of size, it is difficult to determine an appropriate size limitation for such structures. Therefore, the department recommends requiring accessory structures to be limited in height and be clearly subordinate to the primary structure. Additionally, since warehousing is not permitted in most C commercial districts, the department recommends adding a condition stating that warehousing is not an accessory use. Before I move on to the next section, does anyone have any questions about the accessory structures on the tip of their tongue?
Abby, I do.
Yeah.
Just in the residential part where you're saying three structures.
Mm-hmm.
Is that pretty much what conforms with the majority of the municipalities in the county? I'm just wondering.
Yes, this is consistent with a lot of the municipalities that we looked at. Some of them require or only permitted 1 garage and 1 other accessory structure, but we found this to be pretty consistent.
Thank you.
Okay. Next are regulations pertaining to e-commerce or delivery-only retail facilities. Many business operators have moved toward delivery-only retail models in recent years, and this was exacerbated by COVID-19. This is a convenient and contemporary business model that many residents have come to rely on as part of the typical shopping experience. Currently, this use is considered warehousing and only permitted in the C7 General Extensive Commercial District or M Industrial Districts. However, the department finds that it's a desired use throughout the county and could be appropriate if properly defined and regulated. Thus, we recommend adopting a definition of e-commerce or delivery-only retail facility. We recommend requiring that these facilities maintain a minimum of 10% gross floor area as a storefront component for office functions and/or limited in-person customer service. We also recommend that stock and inventory shall not be visible from the exterior of the facility, and all windows on the front facade be transparent. These requirements are to ensure this use looks similar to other office or retail uses permitted in the general shopping districts. Here are some examples of delivery-only retail facilities that look like normal storefronts. And these are examples of what we're trying to avoid. These storefronts have covered windows and no signs, so they don't look like commercial occupants. The department recommends limiting the square footage of e-commerce or delivery-only retail facilities to 2,500 square feet in an individual building or in multiple units of a multi-tenant retail building. The purpose of the size regulation is to keep these facilities in scale with other retail developments. The department recommends permitting this use by right in the C3 shopping district if the facility is 2,500 square feet or less and requiring a conditional use permit for anything larger. The department recommends making them a conditional use in the C2 shopping district. Does anyone have any questions on this portion?
I do, and it's
Sure.
in regards to the stores that would be in there.
Mhm.
As right now, you've got a store, somebody walks in, they pay sales tax, but that's not gonna happen there. How does the sales tax get generated back to the county?
Mel, do you know about the sales tax for online retail?
So I think that just like when someone's doing, you know, their online sales from their house right now, it doesn't, I don't think it does get captured. And I don't think there's a way for the zoning ordinance to address that. I mean, I think some of the commissioners are aware that we've had the Wayfair tax on the ballot a couple times to capture that exact concept, but we didn't dive into that aspect of it, nor do I think that we'd be able to really address it fully. Like to the meat of your question, this one thing this is, you know, somebody using what might otherwise be a vacant storefront, which I guess people are paying property taxes on no matter what. But that is a good point, Keith, but I'm not sure how we would be able to address it.
You know, I mean, the owner of the property is paying the property tax on
Yeah.
it anyway. So even if it's set and empty, you know, we don't want empty spaces.
Right.
But I would hope that if somebody's going there to collect a package they purchased online, they're going there, it's in St. Louis County. No matter where it might be, and there should be some sales tax.
I do think that it might be sort of in between what I'm thinking of, that the Wayfair tax would capture versus just making the sale right there. So that's something we can look into. That way we understand the implications when we bring this back as a letter of rec. Because I do think that is really interesting.
Thanks, Mel.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so next are regulations pertaining to community gardens. Community gardens and community-supported agriculture currently exist in St. Louis County and have for a significant period of time, but the zoning ordinance is silent on these uses. The department finds these are desirable uses as they foster community cohesion, provide healthy food sources in food deserts and food swamps, and create a community good. Pictured are examples of community gardens in North and South St. Louis County. The department recommends adding definitions of community garden and home garden and amending the definition of a farm to include community-supported agriculture. This is a farming model that is community-focused but larger in scale than community gardens. The department finds that community gardens are appropriate as a primary or accessory use in the NU, KP, PS, and all R districts, but recommends a minimum lot size for community gardens that are the primary use on a lot. We recommend the minimum lot size be the same as the minimum lot size for a single-family detached home, except for in the NU and KP districts, because that would require 3 acres, which is larger than the intended scale of a community garden. So we're recommending 1 acre for those zoning districts. We find that produce stands associated with community gardens could be appropriate in the R districts, but would require additional scrutiny, so we are recommending they be added as a conditional use in the R2 through R8 districts. We recommend limiting the size of a produce stand to 1,000 square feet, requiring a minimum of 1 acre in lot size and requiring 2 on-site parking spaces. We're also recommending that elevated garden beds and associated structures like storage sheds be required to meet the setback requirements of the underlying zoning district. This is in part to prevent plants from spreading onto neighboring properties. We recommend prohibiting row crops greater than 2 feet in height from the front yard of any residentially occupied property to maintain the residential character of neighborhoods. Lastly, we recommend allowing community gardens to have 1 freestanding sign not to exceed 30 square feet in area. Does anybody have any questions about community gardens? All right. The next section is site design criteria. We were specifically looking at building size and location, landscaping, fencing, screening, and parking. The recommendations in this section are based on the heightened design requirements the Commission often imposes on planned developments, which we find are desirable in more developments. The first recommendation is to amend the definition of yard. The current definitions only refer to the area between the required setback line and the property line, which creates inconsistencies with other regulations, such as placement of drive-throughs in the front yard, out of the front yard. The department recommends amending these definitions to refer to the area between the facade of the structure and the property line. We've also drafted these diagrams to include with the definitions. Next, we looked at fencing. There are not a lot of uses in the zoning ordinance that require fencing, and there are a few regulations about the type of fencing permitted. We recommend changing the definitions for fence site-proof to require 100% opacity. We also recommend adopting definitions for decorative and semi-site-proof fences. And here are some examples of different fence types. So we've got a site-proof fence, a decorative fence, a site-proof and decorative fence, and then a semi-site-proof fence, which could be chain link with slats or other similar material. We recommend changing the title of section 1003162 to be landscaping and screening regulations and adding the fence requirements to that section. We recommend barbed wire be prohibited in the NU, PS, KP, R, and C districts. We also recommend that decorative fencing be required in any front yard of a commercial or industrial district, with the director of planning having the ability to approve barbed wire or chain link fence in the front yard of an industrial zone site if it is screened with landscaping. We also recommend prohibiting chain link in a commercial or industrial district adjacent to any parcel in the PS, NU, KP, or R districts unless it is screened by landscaping in an industrially zoned district. Lastly, we recommend some amendments to the landscaping requirements. First is to change the width of the buffer zone 1 to be in alignment with the required parking setback. Second is to add a buffer zone requirement for institutional land uses because they are not perfectly analogous to either residential or commercial uses. Last is to require the water source be shown on the landscape plan. Does anyone have any questions about the site design criteria?
I do. Can you hear
Sure.
me?
Yes.
So go back to about the landscaping in front of industrial
For the
fences.
fencing?
What are we talking about? How much landscaping? What are we talking about?
So the way we've written it is landscaping as approved by the Director of Planning, which grants us the ability to look at the surrounding uses and determine what's appropriate for how much screening they is appropriate depending on the use of the site and the use of the surrounding sites. The reason that we've added this provision is that, especially for industrially zoned parcels, sometimes the use on that site requires higher security fencing, chain link or whatever, because it's a safety issue if people can easily get on the site. But when these sites are near residential or park and scenic or non-urban or KP zoned districts, we're concerned about the aesthetics of barbed wire or chain link fence next to these non-industrial uses.
So it could be some landscaping that's like real low level bushes maybe, or
Sure, yeah, it would really depend on what that industrial use is. Are we talking about, you know, a public utility site or a warehouse, and then what the neighboring use is?
and
It
the
could be
language is saying that's going to be up to the planning director's discretion.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so we could require a mix of shrubs or trees and shrubs, depending on the uses.
Abby, that would still, if it was being rezoned, come in front of us for approval. That'd be correct?
Right, if it was part of a planned district, it would still come back.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. The next section is wheel stops and trash enclosures. There are requirements for wheel stops adjacent to sidewalks in median strips and along bioretention basins in the zoning ordinance. The department recommends expanding the requirements for wheel stops or permanent curbs to all parking areas extending to a lot line, sidewalk, internal walkway, planter strip, or building. We're also recommending these curbs be concrete. We find the use of wheel stops throughout parking areas will increase safety. Here are some examples of curbs and wheel stops at lot lines adjacent to internal walkways and landscape areas and around a landscape island. Most developments use a trash enclosure to screen and secure outdoor dumpsters, but they are not currently regulated in the zoning ordinance. We find these structures should be designed in a way that serves the property owner's needs, does not impede the vehicular or pedestrian circulation on site, and are visually compatible with the overall site. And so we recommend adopting a definition for trash enclosure and recommend requiring they be located in the side or rear yard of a property, be located such that trash and recycling pickup does not impede pedestrian or vehicular circulation on site. The developer may be required to provide a trash truck circulation exhibit to show this. We recommend requiring they meet the minimum structure setback requirements of the underlying zoning district and that they be located to minimize noise impacts upon adjoining residential development. On the left is an example of a bad trash enclosure. It's not secured, which can lead to illegal dumping. On the right is a good trash enclosure, which has a gate and protective bollards. The department also recommends requiring landscaping as approved on the site development plan around these structures. Does anyone have any questions? All right, great. The next section is the conditional use permit procedure, section 1003.181. The commission has the ability to make decisions about conditional uses based on 4 criteria. Number 1, where such developments and uses are deemed consistent with good planning practice. Number 2, where such developments and uses can be operated in a manner that is not detrimental to the permitted uses in the surrounding area. Number 3, where such developments and uses can be developed and operated in a manner that is visually compatible with the permitted uses in the surrounding area. Number 4, where such developments and uses are deemed essential or desirable to preserve and promote the public health, safety, and general welfare of St. Louis County. Missouri state case law has transformed the CUP process and set new precedents for granting or denying a conditional use permit. Recently, the Missouri State Supreme Court sided with the city of Creve Coeur in a case regarding the issuance of a CUP. The court found that the city was able to deny the issuance of a CUP for any reason because such a provision existed in their zoning ordinance. Based on that precedent, the department recommends amending this section to say that the commission can deny any request for a conditional use, including but not limited to, because it determines the use does not meet one or more of the criteria set forth. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Next, the department considered regulations for facilities for local government use. Office buildings for governmental agencies were a permitted use in the C2 and C3 shopping districts in 1965, but the use was removed from the zoning ordinance entirely in 1984. Police and fire stations, meanwhile, were added as a permitted use in residence districts in 1982. There is a desire to site St. Louis County satellite offices throughout the county and in neighborhoods. These offices would not provide any customer-facing services such as personal property tax filing, but would be for divisions such as the Problem Properties Unit, allowing these groups to have storage and employee break rooms in the areas they serve. We find this use is analogous to police or fire stations, as they provide services necessary to maintain stable residential communities. The department recommends adopting a definition for facilities for local government use. We find it's appropriate as a permitted use in the R3 through R8 residence district, all C and all M districts. We find it's appropriate as a conditional use in the NU, KP, R1, R1A, and R2 residence districts. This follows the regulations for fire and police stations. Does anyone have any questions about this portion? Okay.
So no, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait. So go back right there. So sometimes it would be a conditional use permit for the quote, these like example, satellite offices.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's permitted by, it would be permitted by right.
That's correct. We
in
just
some-
went, yeah,
Some
that's correct.
districts. And so this is to add the definition and state when it's permitted or when it's a conditional use.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, and mainly it is for the development to allow these satellite offices.
Right. Yeah, for
'Cause
the
right now,
county.
satellite offices, well, let me say what I remember from way back when I used to work at the county, they did allow people to come in, residents to come in and take out permits, for example, building permits or pay taxes. And so what I hear you saying is these satellite offices would just be for the employees, basically.
That's correct. For employees who do and departments that engage in a lot of field work, so that they can have offices closer to the areas in which they're doing the field work.
And do we know are they going into existing structures like strip mall areas, or are they talking about building new ones?
They
So
could go ahead, Mel.
I was just going to say that because right now we only have really one good example that I think would explain how this change would look out in the real world. So police stations, fire stations are permitted in the residence districts because, we find that they're important to have throughout the communities, close to our homes. And we had a situation, and for context, like Abby said, this used to be a permitted use in the zoning ordinance. We don't know why it was stripped out as being a named use. So basically, we're just slotting it back in. But the Problem Properties Unit of the Department of Transportation and Public Works was looking into a former fire station, which is in a residential zoning district. But the zoning ordinance isn't written to let a regular sort of government office, a government function that isn't police or fire, to exist in the residential zoning district. So this would allow a group like the Problem Properties Unit to reuse something like a firehouse, or it wouldn't be like them going in to reuse a single family home or anything. It would be a commercially, constructed building they would be occupying.
Okay.
But there isn't a plan for expanded satellite offices or anything. That's not the intention of this modification.
Okay.
Okay, the next section is regulations for pet care and pet daycare facilities. There are a variety of pet-related uses that exist in the county but are not fully reflected in the zoning ordinance. The department recommends creating a hierarchy of pet-related uses and recommends regulations based on the intensity of those uses. In terms of definitions, we are recommending separating veterinary clinic and animal hospital into two individual terms. We're also recommending adopting definitions for pet care facility and pet daycare facility, the difference between the two being that a pet care facility allows overnight boarding. This is the proposed zoning district assignment for the various pet-related uses. The most significant change is making pet care facility with overnight boarding a conditional use in the C3 where it is currently permitted by right. We've also added a veterinary clinic as a conditional use in the C1 shopping district. The department recommends adopting regulations regarding the siting of outdoor pet relief areas to ensure such areas do not detriment surrounding development. These regulations are requiring relief areas in the side or rear yard and requiring them to meet the structure setbacks of the underlying zoning district. Does anyone have any question about these uses? Okay. The next section is 1003.167 miscellaneous regulations. The department looked specifically at the regulations for temporary construction offices, field offices, storage, and real estate offices associated with development. Temporary real estate offices are commonly used with new residential subdivisions. These are some pictures of the types of structures we're describing. So the left is a temporary sales trailer for a single family subdivision, and the right is a temporary sales office that was developed inside of a display house for a residential subdivision. Home builders also install signs when they're building a new subdivision. On the left are subdivision banners along the development street for the Majestic Point subdivision, and on the right is the subdivision information sign for the preserve. The department recommends amending the regulations pertaining to these structures to be closer in line with what home builders desire for their developments, noting that these structures are all temporary. We recommend permitting a maximum of one temporary real estate office or sales office, which may be located on the development tract or within 2,000 feet of the development. We also recommend specific setbacks for such structures and that a lift van accessible parking space be provided. The department also recommends allowing 2 freestanding temporary signs associated with the sales office and 6 banner poles with banners be permitted. Building permits will be required for these signs and they are not allowed in the right-of-way. Does anyone have any questions about this section? All right. The next section is 1003-200 Administration, Enforcement, and Permits. The department recommends repealing and replacing this section in its entirety in order to bring it in line with current county policies. The impetus for this rewrite is that the zoning enforcement team is moving into the planning department from the Department of Transportation and Public Works, and the zoning enforcement officer title will be eliminated. Therefore, it is necessary to clarify the specific offices and bodies responsible for decision-making, including the duties of the Director of Transportation and Public Works and the Director of Planning. We are also recommending repealing Section 1003.410, penalties for violation of zoning ordinance, and moving the violations into Section 1003-200. We recommend including a detailed description of who is responsible for violations issued on a property, how to remedy them, and how the county can act on violations. Next is Section 1003.210 fees. We are not recommending any changes to the fees themselves, but we are recommending the fees listed in other sections of the zoning ordinance be moved into this section. Here are the fees listed. They're the location verification fees and fees for removal of temporary structures. Lastly, we recommend that Section 1003.310 Advisory and Review Committee be repealed because this committee no longer exists. Does anyone have any questions about those sections?
Yeah. Okay. You don't talk fast, but you went through it quickly. So you're moving. Okay, so I understand this last slide that you showed us a couple of slides ago, like the zoning language.
Sure.
You're moving it or repealing it because why?
This section, the penalties section? Or section
Penalties and
200.
who's enforcing it. There was something you said about enforcing
So the
something and
structure,
clarifying roles. What's going on? Let's get some background here.
yeah, the structure right now is that the planning department, if you, and the way Jacob describes it, which I think is helpful, is if the development process is a train, the planning department, by reviewing and approving site development plans for new development, redevelopment, is sort of the engine. And then behind us are, the permit reviewers in public works, civil plan reviewers reviewing work on county right-of-ways. And then in the Department of Transportation and Public Works, in code enforcement, is the Office of Zoning Enforcement. So they are the group that is tasked with making sure that what's out there in the real world looks like what's on the approved site development plans. That group is, they used to be in the Department of Planning a long time ago before any of us were on staff. But since they've been divorced from the planning department, we do some duplicative work. Our goals and our strategies aren't always totally aligned. So Jacob and Stephanie Leon Streeter, the Director of Transportation and Public Works, have decided to bring the Office of Zoning Enforcement back into the Department of Planning, those staff members and their functions. But once the function of enforcing the zoning ordinance is back in the Department of Planning, the structure and the decision making needs to be massaged in the code a little bit. Like if you look what it says right now, and actually it might be in the charter, the first duty assigned to the Director of Transportation is to enforce zoning ordinance. It's not even issue permits, it's enforce the zoning ordinance. So there is definitely rationale for that group to be in code enforcement, but with the goals and with how the county is structured now, these changes will be really necessary for us to bring that group in and align all of our work. So part of that is combining these two sections of the zoning ordinance. So this section 200 is administration, enforcement, and permits, but this section doesn't say anything about the penalties if you need to be enforced. So we're suggesting that the text from 410, which is about the penalties, be moved into this section. So it would be administration, enforcement, permits, and penalties.
This is also going to enlarge the planning staff.
Yes,
because
we
the
will.
Zoning people on the 6th floor will be a part of the planning. So how many
Right.
staff is that?
So the zoning enforcement officer, they have a manager right now. And then there are 3 zoning specialist positions. One of them is vacant right now. So then they also have an intermittent retiree on staff. So there are 3 humans right now who would be joining the department, 4 positions. Is that right? So no new county staff people. It's all the same people who are in the Office of Zoning Enforcement right now. But they would be joining us, yes.
So that makes sense. So let me say something here while I'm asking those questions. At one time in my life, in my early young career, I worked on the 6th floor as a plan reviewer.
That's right.
And the zoning people had their little corner off in the world.
That's right.
On the 6th floor. And also as a plan reviewer, we did come down and interact with the planning department. But now I am 30 years since working at the county. And hearing this, it makes sense. It makes sense for zoning to be a part of the planning department because we're dealing with zoning matters, even as the planning commissioner. So
Absolutely.
it makes sense.
Yeah. We're excited. It's definitely got stuff like this we've got to work through to make sure we are doing it right. But yes, it should
So how
be.
soon might the actual transition of that staff?
So we're sort of ramping into it at the end of this year. That way, January 1st, they would actually be in our budget. We're still working out some of the physical space needs. But we've basically begun slowly transitioning them into the department in function, but then in name and in the budget, it would be the beginning of next year.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
We're recommending approval of these recommendations. We find these amendments will make the chapter more reflective of current land use and site design trends. The new site design criteria will allow the county to facilitate desirable development, and the other administrative changes proposed will bring the chapter into conformance with the current county policies. So at this time, I would like to request a motion.
Before that, real quickly though, so Abby, great job. I know that's a lot of information. As always, just, no matter what your action is tonight, we'll always be bringing this back as a letter of recommendation for your formal vote. But we will also, we're working on specifically section 200, administration, enforcement, and permits. We're working with the county counselor's office to make sure that everything in there is, legally kosher. So I anticipate we will be putting a cover memo on the letter of recommendation that goes through any tweaks we make to attachment B, the the ordinance modifications. I do not anticipate we will change much in attachment A, the actual analysis, but I did want to let the commission know that before you take any action.
Abby, I also want to thank you for the outstanding presentation. It was very informal. I'm sure everybody learned a lot. I did, once again. But with that being said, you've heard the recommendation of approval. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion, we move forward.
Do I have a second on the motion?
Second it.
Said, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nays, ayes have that. On to old business, letters for approval. PC 24 and 25 dash 24 LNC truck repair.
Before you is PC 24 and 2524 LNC truck repair. The request is for a conditional use permit procedure in the C7 General Extensive Commercial District, and another additional request for a conditional use permit procedure in the C7 General Extensive Commercial District. The proposed uses are the vehicle repair facility and towed vehicle storage on tracts size of 0.44 acres and 0.89 acres on the south side of Liberty Avenue, approximately 200 and 300 feet east of North Warson Road. As a reminder, the site is located in North County, and you can see the two sites outlined in red. And the department will note that the letters of decision are consistent with the vote from last month. And at this time, I'd like to request a motion.
And that motion was for approval or denial?
Approval.
Okay, you've heard the staff's recommendation. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion.
Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nay. Ayes have it. And next we have PC 28-24, 29-24 St. Louis County Planning Commission Flower and Fendler Inc. Are we going to do both these at the same time?
So we actually would like, if the commission would hold these items, we've gotten some,
Okay.
there's just some new information that we need to work through before this letter can be sent.
Is there anything you'd like to share with us?
Well,
about
the
that?
commission, some of the commission is familiar with how this site has just been so like criminally difficult to develop. It relates to Lockmore Drive being a private road right now, trying to determine, still trying to determine the maintenance and the access rights for that easement.
So I don't have to do any action on this then?
I think a motion to hold would be appropriate
Okay.
just because because of how we put it on the agenda.
Very, for both of them. I'm gonna read both.
Yes, together.
Okay, I'm gonna do that. So I'd like to, I need a motion for a hold on PC 28-24 St. Louis County Planning Commission request, as well as PC 29-24 Flower and Fendler Inc. Do I have a motion for a hold, please?
Motion for a hold.
Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
All those signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nays, ayes have it. And now we have REPC 142-81 and Enver Yeltsin.
This is PC 142-81 Enver Yalson. This is a C8 planned commercial district governing 1.43 acres on the south corner of Tesson Ferry Road and Old Tesson Ferry Road and the northwest side of Butler Hill Road at Old Tesson Ferry Road. The request before the Planning Commission tonight is to amend the existing C8 ordinance to allow a tattoo parlor as one of the permitted uses. This site is in South County, and you can see it outlined in red on the aerial. It's directly across Tesson Ferry Road from the Tesson Bridge development. PC 142-81 Enver Yalkin was a request for a change of zoning from R3 Residence District to C8 Planned Commercial District, and a request for amended development in the C8 Planned Commercial District to construct a second multi-tenant retail building. There already was one multi-tenant retail building on the site at the time. The Planning Commission found the proposed zoning and uses compatible with the surrounding land uses and recommended approval. County Council concurred and adopted Ordinance 10,532 in February of 1982, and the building was subsequently built. The C8 ordinance permits all C2 shopping district uses except for those that require a conditional use permit. In 1981, when this originally went before the Planning Commission and County Council, a tattoo parlor was a permitted use in the C2 shopping district. But in 1998, tattoo parlors became a conditional use in the C2 shopping district. Thus, the current petitioner is requesting this ordinance amendment. The amendment is to permit a single tattoo parlor at the site. According to the petitioner, the parlor would not take walk-ins and would be appointment only. They would have a maximum of 6 tattoo artists on site, and they would not provide any other services like piercings. It would only be tattoos. The department is recommending approval of this request. We find that a tattoo shop is compatible with the surrounding permitted uses and is in keeping with the general development pattern in the area. And we also note that tattoo parlors were permitted in the C2 shopping district when this originally went to the Planning Commission in 1981. And so at this time, I would like to request a motion.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation of the staff. Do I have a motion of approval?
Move to approve.
There's a second.
Second.
Are there any questions?
I do have a question. Are they in operation now?
No, they're not. This would be new.
Okay. But the building's already there.
Yes, the building exists. This would be in a vacant tenant space.
Mhm.
And so they're not proposing any changes to the building itself.
We've had a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Nays. Ayes have it. We have no site plans, correct?
No site plans.
For the good of the order.
So we keep the STL Code 2050 update there basically as a standing item, but I don't really have anything to share basically because of the discussion we had earlier about the steering committee meeting and the comprehensive planning committee.
Yeah. Now, when's our next public hearing then?
So there's public hearing a week from today here in person at the county building. There are 2 petitions. You know, I don't want to jinx it, but like it should be a pretty good meeting. They always are, but you know, it's not as long as some of them have been recently.
And then how about the comprehensive meeting? Are we going to
I
have one the
just had
following
that
Tuesday?
opened. I believe it would be the following Tuesday, the 23rd.
23rd?
Yes.
The 23rd is a Monday.
Yes, for the comprehensive planning committee. I think we
Okay.
agreed the 3rd Monday. Yeah, Paul and I were chatting about that earlier, so he will I'll ask him to send something this week certainly about that.
And we're going to do it and we're having it on a Monday, correct? That's what I thought.
Yes, and I think we agreed in person up
Yes.
here on the 5th floor in the planning library.
Okay. Okay, with that being said, I move for adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Make a motion. Second.
Do I have, and we have a second? All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nays, ayes have it, and we'll see everybody September 16th at 7 a.m. and that'll be a live.
Oh, 7 p.m.
7 a.m.
I'm sorry.
I
We
mean,
won't
if
be
you
here
come
at
at
7
7, you
a.m.
can come at 7
I'll stay
a.m.
all
and
day. I'll
maybe
come over
Peter
and
will be
visit.
here. Yeah. All right. See you in a week. Thanks,
Okay,
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good
Thanks
one.
for all the reports.